Right now, you can buy a house for less than it costs you to rent. What do I mean? Home ownership is a less expensive option than renting in a majority of U.S. housing markets right now at the moment. Even with home prices increasing significantly by more than 10% in most of the country over the past year, this is still true. There's a new study that has come out. The Atom Data Solutions found that owning a median-priced home was more affordable than the average rent on a 3-bedroom property in 58% of the 1,100 U.S. counties that they analyzed. We have this great chart here from Freddie Mac, the primary mortgage market survey chart. And what we can see is that the factors and all of the expenses of owning, including monthly mortgage payments, property taxes, and homeowners insurance, still makes it cheaper than renting in many places. So when you see that mortgage, you can see those mortgage rates right there starting to tick upwards. Higher rates are causing people not to refinance or take mortgages like they previously were. Refinance activity is 40% lower than a year ago, and the volume of mortgage applications for purchases was 12% lower than just 1 week ago. And so if we go ahead and we look at the share of income spent on housing, what you can see here is homeowners spend a smaller share of their income on housing as compared to renters. This is true at all income levels. So not only is it more affordable, but you also end up spending a smaller share of their income on housing. And so why exactly is it still cheaper to rent in big cities? Well, homeownership is more affordable than renting in suburban and rural areas, but it's cheaper to rent in a big city rather than buy. So it's all about where do you live and what is the type of density in a population. We have this quote here, Todd Teta, the CPO at Atom. He said, the housing market boom of the past decade keeps pushing home values to new records. Yet, homeownership still remains the more affordable option for average workers in a majority of the country because it still takes up a smaller portion of their pay. Rising wages and interest rates around 3% are enough to offset recent price run-ups and keep ownership on the plus side of the affordability ledger compared to renting. Generally, I agree with this. I don't think that interest rates are going to get to 3%. That would be pretty crazy from about 0% where we are today. But of course, as rates rise in 2022, which is the expectation, that is why risk assets are selling off, that narrative may shift. Homes will be cheaper, but mortgages will be higher. And so although you can buy a cheaper house, there may be more carrying cost to a higher priced mortgage. And so ultimately the conclusion, if you look at this little scatter plot of geography, if you will, what you can see is in each one of these counties, there is either a buy or a rent. Which one is more affordable? And as you look into the high densities of the Northeast, you can see that it is more affordable to actually rent rather than buy. Same thing all throughout California, because they basically don't care about their citizens and have absolutely destroyed their economy and forced people to leave. But then if you look all throughout the East, through the Midwest and down into the Southeast, outside of South Florida, it is actually better to buy rather than rent. Now, John, when you see this data, you rent today, I rent, Joe rents. Does that change your mind?
Yes. I mean, it's been historically known that owning a home is better just based on an equity front. You can also use leverage to own a home versus just renting. But on the opposite side, and the other argument of it is that you can use that down payment to actually put money into the market. Like if you can get a better return somewhere else rather than just the appreciation of your home, then it's better to do that. But on a long-term basis, I've always agreed that it is better to own a home than rent a home. But it also all depends on like the individual's financial situation and what their long-term goals are.
Joe?
Yeah, I don't think this is like new news, right? I think most people understand that owning a home was more beneficial from a cost perspective, given you're getting equity in it, you're taking a mortgage out, you can reduce costs in certain different ways, and parts of it are tax deductible. So I think that most people are renting or just in the circumstance where housing prices have increased too much and they don't have the ability to go do it currently. I think that they know that they're probably not getting the value that they would through a house, right? You're not, unless you're renting to own that property, then you're not actually getting anything for it other than a place to live in most cases. So I think that this isn't necessarily new, but it's interesting to see the data nonetheless.
One thing to point out in this survey is that it is cheaper to rent than it is to buy a home in a lot of areas that are like 500,000 people or less. So like smaller suburban areas, but it's still cheaper to rent than to buy a home in major metropolitan areas or cities that have 500 to a million or a million plus residents, just based off the data.
Well, I think there's different reasons for it too. Like someone can rent because they cannot afford a home. Someone can rent because they cannot afford the home that they want. Someone can rent because they think home prices are too expensive or properties are overvalued relative to where they should be. Some people might rent because they think a crash is coming. Some people may rent because they're moving somewhere and they don't know if they're going to stay there long term. Some people may rent because they don't know what area they want to live in, right? My point is there's a million different reasons why someone may rent, and a lot of that ends up people end up taking a hit when it comes to like the actual return on their investment relative to what a house would give them versus just putting money into a rental payment every month for that flexibility. And renting obviously provides you a lot more flexibility than owning a house. So I think when it comes to that, like there's a million different reasons why it's possible. But I think the general idea is most people understand, hey, with a home, you're paying a mortgage every month. You're able to leverage that value, buy something and create equity versus a rent payment where someone else owns that and is benefiting from you paying their mortgage.
The other piece I think that people have to just wrap their heads around is it's not just about the cost of what you're buying, as John talked about. There's the leverage components, but also, one of the big things that we've all realized, as much as we joke around about New York and Miami, is that the Miami rental process, the market, the way that the landlords operate is completely different than New York. In New York, there's no like nonsense, right? It's like, look, we got our lease. Give us your information, you sign the lease, you get in, don't talk to me, and you're good to go. The apartment works. In Miami, these people are wilding out. There's no rent controls. They literally do whatever they want. They just randomly call you and like, hey, I need to come to the unit. Like there's all kinds of nonsense that goes on in Miami. In New York, none of that happens. So I do think that along with it, though, is pretty much every building in New York operates on a somewhat standardized thing. Is what questions to ask. How much does it cost to rent per month? What is there? If I buy it, how much is it? What's the HOA? All that type of stuff. Here in Miami, each building's different as well. And so I think that one of the things that New York has going for it in terms of the experience, there's a lot of standardization. There's a lot of kind of the city telling the landlords what they've got to do and how to structure some of this stuff. And then the rent controls, we talked about it. Every person I know that moved to Miami a year ago, now their landlords are like, yeah, we're going to increase rents 20%. I'm like, whoa, okay. That doesn't really seem like it's very affordable.
Yeah.
But home prices are up 20%. So maybe it's the same thing.